Without clients, we won't have paychecks. We have to get to that point where the customers matter.
All these things have happened over our careers, and we have to keep evolving. And this is just the next step in the evolution.
This is our time to shine as insurance professionals and to really help our clients see our value.
Diamonds are made under pressure. The best agents will be made in this market. There is opportunity out there. So, how about this? We've been in a hard market for over a year now, and everybody might be so sick of hearing the word hard market. Everyone knows my mantra on it is it's just the market. We need to stop calling it the hard market, but for SEO optimization, podcast usage, and YouTube, we still need to call it the hard market. No one is searching the market from what I hear. But kind of a year in, this podcast will be centered around what are we all seeing in this market? What are we seeing as far as carrier movement? What are we seeing the best agencies doing? Because understand that we're still probably going to be here for another 2 years. We have to embrace the idea of what's next and how do we not just survive, but thrive in this marketplace. And I'm excited for this because I've always said, I think whenever there's a challenge, there's an opportunity. And I get to see so many agencies right now really trying to take advantage of that opportunity. And then I see a lot of other agencies, and it's just like this in the whole world, right? Like you see people who make excuses for things. Those people are like, well, I'm not selling anything because it's a hard market. I'm not selling anything because I have to go to handle all these renewals. And when it was a softer market, the sales excuses were still there. They were just different.
Right.
So once they get open and just open up for some things that we're seeing. So let's start at the very front of the life cycle. What are you guys seeing on the new business front as far as this hard market going? What things do you see clients doing well? Where do you see some challenges? Let's just open it up and have a fun, lively discussion on hard market and insurance sales.
I think the clients that are growing and creating noise are the ones that have standards and there's accountability at the office to begin with. So like it's being monitored, right? They're also looking at what they can do versus what they can't do and really focusing on the can. So they're taking the time to get to know their market, finding what it is they're going to be good at or hot at. And they're asking the pre-qualifying questions up front, right? We're not going to spend 4.5 hours trying to find the right market just because somebody called. We're going to say, we don't have a great fit for that right now. Here's some other resources that might be better. But if it's something in their kill zone, they're all over it. Their sales process is in place. They're good. They know what they want and they know how to close it. And I think that that's really the people that do a little bit of everything is fine. But I think if the market is more of a struggle, we can't be as general as we once were. We have to really know where to spend our time, where to spend our effort, and what clients are going to appreciate the level of service we're providing. If we save them $1 this year, they're going to expect $1 next year. And it's just not reality.
Yeah, I think clients prioritizing their time, right? So piggybacking off of what Stephen was saying, those that have really empowered themselves and leveled up their game and have their team understanding that they are the licensed insurance professional and that they have the permission to say yes and no to certain things and really understanding what they do well and having a wonderful sales process and speed and their follow-up and great communication with their carriers and know what they can and cannot take, and then prioritizing their time and honoring their clients' time are being the most successful in closing sales.
And I think a lot of agencies are struggling because they focused on one carrier and now that carrier has pulled out of the state they're in. So I think that's a huge mistake. Instead of looking at all the carriers and what those carriers do well and looking for a target market. What is my best client? And how can I sell to that best client? I think some of them are just out. Let me just grab whatever's coming in the door, and it stopped coming in the door. And they had to start going out to look for it. And they weren't used to that. They were used to everything just coming to them. Now they have to go out and look for it. So you've got some agencies that are actually targeting markets, going out, like Stephen said, grabbing those markets, running with it, selling it, and doing well. But then you have the other ones that just don't have a target, are just kind of winging it. So they're having to readjust and find processes and procedures. And those who don't already have them are struggling to figure out what's next.
I think good agencies are also setting like service standards within the agency. Like what clients should expect, what does good service look like, what does the team need to do to keep the client happy, and how do we be proactive in the market? So if somebody's upset over a 10% increase, but we're seeing on average 60, it's like, yes, I can understand that's your point of view, but let me help you understand it a little bit better. We're not going to spend a lot of time. We're not going to bend over backwards. We're not going to break all the rules just because somebody's unhappy when the agency has standards. And the agents are finding it more comforting to be like, at least I know what the expectation is now, right? Like, it's okay for me to say no to this because I have to say yes to this.
Well, and I want to say too, on the new business side, I think that another huge scenario you have is like the agencies that keep sales and service together. Sales has gone way, way down the pike. And so they're almost anemic on sales because most of those people, they have the heart of a service person, not necessarily a producer. So they want to save everybody first, and then sales comes at the very, very bottom. If they have time, when they have time, they send a quote because in their mind, like this is it. And we do a lot of workshops where I ask people, what would you do first? And it's amazing, like the fights that break out. It's like, well, we do new business because that it can't fit. Or we would do service because we already have that customer. We need to take care of them, and it's like, well, two things can be true at the same time. And you're right on both, but the leader needs to come in and give the clarity of what to do first and second based on metrics and numbers, because you also can't be whittling the book away and trying to save people that aren't going to be saved and not write any new business as well. And I'll say this, I think that some states have a harder time writing new business than others. Some agencies have a harder time, just depending on a whole variety of topics. We really encourage that if your new business volume has slowed down, yes, some people may need to go out and drum up business. Some agencies just don't have that model. The model is it's all inbound and that's the expectation. They don't have the true outbound producer. I've been encouraging my clients to take some of those producers and put them on the save team, because all of the lost business calls I've been listening to, it's like, oh, you save money with State Farm. I understand money is really tight right now. Let me help you with that. Or you save $400. That's a lot. Did you get the same coverage? And the person was like, yes. Like, let's be honest, the person doesn't even know if they got the same coverage. And they're just not fighting for that same way, because in their mind, it's one less client to solve. There's a legitimate reason they're leaving. Not service, it's something he did. It's $400, right? But that's not still going to get us where we need to. So if you can take some of the sales team and put them as the sales team and pay them some commission, when the market comes around, you now have still a good sales team intact, and you didn't have to wean it down just based on market conditions. And you're going to help save some of those people, coming down the pike. And hopefully your producer team is calling the win back. And so now at the very least, they can't win them back. They already had a call and had established some kind of connection. So, the new business, I think you have to be selective. I think you have to prioritize, but I also think you have to close fast. And there's a lot of, all my clients, there's a lot of shoppers in the marketplace, which means you need a strong sales process to take it from shop to close. Mm-hmm. People are not going to put up with a weak sales process right now when they're saying like, well, if that's you're not getting back to me for 4 days, I'm not going to put up with that either. So I think we all have to have a strong sales.
To that point, Kelly, I was going to just say, I think there's a lot of shoppers right now, right? There's a lot of looky-loos. And so those things that are coming in may not be in our target. There might be existing claims. There's reasons why they're shopping, and we need to be clearly identifying those things and not spinning our wheels and spending time on things that we really shouldn't be spending time on.
Yeah, I think that's where the standards really come into play, and being polite and turning them down quickly. And it's a good, like, it's the Macy's Santa, right? Like, well, we don't have it, but Gimbal does, we're not a good fit, but go to State Farm. Like, go to your favorite competitor in town and let them take all the no prior autos all day long. Let them beat their head against the wall.
I got 3 emails. Well, I got an email from one of our secret shoppers this morning who is working on several secret shopper calls. And 3 of them, she said, I just wanted to let you know, I think it's important that the agencies know that I'm not getting a call back. She called and left a message to one of them. She actually spoke to somebody, gave them all the information, and has not heard back. So we have to look at that sales process. If there's people shopping and they're calling in, what are we doing with those leads? Are we letting them just go? I mean, it's amazing how many secret shoppers come back and say, I never got a call back. Why would you take the time, waste their time and your time to get all the information and then not even call them back?
Ooh, pick me, pick me.
Steven has a T-Rex hand up.
I have my little
Wow.
yeah, because I say we, the service, some of the service staff is so overwhelmed, but they still want to be helpful. And I'm saying this in a facetious voice on purpose, that they take all the information and then all these other things pile up. And then they're like, oh crap. And 3 weeks later, they go look and they're like, there was still that person for me to quote. And I got a recorded call just today that literally was that the lady calls the client back. She's like, hey, I'm looking for Ray. And they're like, oh, Ray's not available right now. She's like, this is so-and-so with XYZ agency. And I'm calling back on that auto quote. And the person on the phone's like, we literally called you 4 weeks ago. She's like, yeah, well, I got your quote done now. And he's like, we found other coverage 2 days later. We didn't get another call back after leaving another message. She's like, but I did the quote. You still want to know what it is? And he's like, no, we literally have already replaced our coverage. We're fine. I don't need to talk to you because you couldn't return my call in a timely fashion. And she's like, well, that's kind of rude.
But this goes into two buckets, right? It goes into the bucket of sales process, right?
Right.
And then the second bucket of leadership. But there's a third bucket of just, and then we're going to do a whole podcast on this in a couple of weeks. So everybody listen up, but like just burnout where people are just going to take the next thing in line. Like strategic thinking has vacated the premises. And it's like, I would have called the person and be like, oh my gosh, I just saw this come up. It fell through the cracks. Did you get coverage? I still quote this for you. It'd be my top priority, but like, why quote it at that point in time? And I think that's where it's like we focus so heavily on like the tracking component. What's your sales process? You have to know where every lead is from the point it enters into your agency because there is spin off and run off and everything else. And at the very front, if that agency had maybe some standards, it would have been like, no, we're not rating it. Like, let's just move on and let that person go.
Yeah.
The next thing I think we can kind of go through is like, so we sell a new piece of business, like, what are we seeing from the servicing side of things? Because not necessarily renewal, we'll talk about that in a minute, but just general servicing of accounts, because this is also very complicated today. Underwriters have been taking quite some time. I don't want to throw underwriters under a bus, but like the speed is not what it used to be. So we're all still remembering a different time. Underwriters are writing to the letter of the book on anything. So it's becoming more complicated to hold a customer experience and communicate to your customers when not everything is clear. Like if you process something in personal lines, like every screen is like, contact your underwriter. So it's like, hold on. They just put out, they put an addition on their host, contact your underwriter.
Danger.
Yeah, danger. We might be able to get off of this. Quick, contact your underwriter. So what are you guys seeing on the servicing end of things?
I think in a lot of agencies, there's not a good handoff between service and sale. So like the client doesn't know what the expectation is. So the producers are getting burned out because the client's still reaching out to the producer for changes or ID cards or whatever they need in the future. And they're just like, but that's not my job. And they're like, are just kicking the client back to service. And service is like, okay, but now the client doesn't want to talk to me because you didn't tell him to talk to me. I mean, it's not the best situation, but the agencies that are successful is like, hey, 30, 60 days in, whatever, the producer is sending an email or an automated email goes out saying, hey, thank you so much. I'm still here, but moving forward, your account's going to be serviced by our service team, who's ridiculous and amazing, right? If you have any needs, please reach out. And the service team is then stepping in and able to help better because the client knows what the expectation is. It's like when you go on a first date and you get all the way to the end and you're like, oh my God, that was so amazing. And they're like, okay, now you get to go talk to this person. You're like, but I like you. And they're like, yeah, but I've closed the deal. Like, you now have to go over here. We have to have that warm
for a very long time. I'm unclear on what you're talking about.
I'm unclear. I haven't been on a date in 27 years either, so I'm just guessing. The interwebs. Bobby and I talked about the interwebs today because I'm 100 years old.
Well, concept of, I'm not going to call my electrician to come solve my plumbing problem. Right?
You're not?
Well, I mean, Maybe depends. But I think, everybody has what they're great at an agency, and that goes from the person answering the phone and greeting that person when they come in, to the account management staff, to the salespeople, and everybody needs to know their roles and their responsibilities, and when that handoff has to happen. And we have to have a lot of clarity there. It makes us much more efficient when we can do that. And so I think it's important for us during the sales process to make that very clear as well. And I think sometimes I find a lot with especially sales producers, like they have a hard time with the handoff because, that's my client. They do the that's my client thing too, right? So if I hand it off, what is somebody going to do? Because these are producers, maybe they don't want to go knock on doors, and maybe they prefer to issue a certificate than try and go meet with a center of influence. As leaders, we need to be aware of that and monitoring that and making sure that they're headed out there, and then leaving our service staff the ability to truly service those accounts. But I think that they are overwhelmed and they're burnout. And so there's a lot of pushing work back and forth and not really dealing with the issues.
And I think in this market, producers' personalities and service staff personalities are different. The sales staff are usually more open to change, and they kind of change with the market because they're out in it, they're seeing it, they see what people want, they see what the sales they need. But then the service staff is kind of like stuck in their own ways and they don't want to change them. So we've got to kind of get our service staff to that open mindset to where they can do hard things. And I think they almost, when the phone rings, they cringe. And several of our 12-question quizzes, people have answered, what is the result your staff is looking for? Is it outcomes or transactions? And all of them say transactions. And we want outcomes. We want to build that rapport. We want to, help the client, educate the client. But I think they're just picking up the phone to hang up the phone and get done with that. They want to just pick up the phone, finish, pick up the phone, finish, pick up the phone, finish. And if we keep doing that, where we end up being in reactive mode instead of proactive mode. And when we're in that reactive mode, every single call is like, right? And that's what we're expecting. That's what we think is going to happen. So we're assuming that. And then when we answer the phone, it may not be that, but we're already in that mindset of, oh, it's another customer calling upset. Instead of looking at that as an opportunity to answer the phone and to help the client and just have an enjoyable conversation with somebody that pays your paycheck. Because I think sometimes we forget that without clients, we won't have paychecks. We have to get to that point where the customers matter. And it's not the old saying of, the customer's always right, because we're in the insurance industry and they're not. We have to educate them about insurance and get them to understand what this market is, what's happening, and how we can work together to find a solution.
Yeah, I also think on the service side, we have to just kind of remind ourselves, especially if you're working with a producer, there's a lot of things that you can control with a producer if you choose to take that mentality of, I'm going to update you every Friday where things stand, so you don't have to think about them at 2 a.m. in the morning. And I need these 3 things from you in order to do my job. And when you get overwhelmed as an account manager, you need to go to your producer and say, I have these 4 competing things. What's the best way to handle it?
Yeah.
And let them say, oh, I can do this. I'll take this, do this. But so many account managers just sort of shut down as opposed to just being the air traffic controller of that desk of like, hey, I know your renewal is coming up. I have 3 of the 5 the market's back. Do you want to present right now with these? I still think that this one that came in is going to be the best. I don't think the other 2 are going to be at go present. Go get out there and tell me if we're going to go buying this or not. And I think that so many of them work and the producers, we have to realize producers often working from their phones and from vehicles and stuff like that. They don't always have it. And back to kind of what Bobby had said, I also really encourage everybody to say, you know what? As opposed to doing the ping pong game back and forth, be upfront and clear. Can I just call this customer? Like we had a big discussion about this in the agency I was at last week where, the account managers all feel like I have to go back to the producer with this piece of paper and then they're going to handle it. So it could be like adding a commercial vehicle. And like the owners who are the producers were like, no, you can go handle that. And I had to talk to the owners and say, hold on, rather than you even taking the VIN number for this commercial auto, why don't you stop and just get it right to the account manager and have them do it start to finish? Like, why are you even seeking information? But everything's just
Called
muscle
me,
memory.
because
Just
they
treating
called
you
me and
right.
I felt special.
Or my biggest pet peeve in insurance actually is texting. Like, I think texting is great when it goes to an agency line. It's horrible when it goes to one person. And then it's just like everything falls in this one person. And anyway, that's for a different topic. Somebody's gonna send me some mail. Kelly doesn't believe in texting. I do believe in texting. I believe in agency texting. I don't believe in it when like people are just texting you on a Saturday. It's not the right way to operate and do business from the insurance perspective. So let's talk about now, the renewal, right? So the renewal is a hot topic. So at this point in time, we have clients that are going to be facing their second hard market renewal, right? And I think for many people that we work with, we've gotten everybody like duct taped together to get through that first year. And now the second year is going to come and it's probably another rate increase. So like, it's kind of like it's going to keep getting harder and harder and harder to keep saying the same thing, the same thing, the same thing, and not have some people inquire about moving around or is this still really the best solution? The first year is shocking, right? So I think that was on the side, but the second year you're probably like, okay, things should mellow out. Not exactly. And so we have to continue to have a different message, but be kind and caring to people, understanding that on Washington, they're starting to call this an insurance crisis. Anytime in government they start calling things a crisis, it'll probably get a logo and some branding pretty soon. That we have to be cognitive of how we handle this renewal is the client to me has to be at the center of it. And I see so many agencies right now almost kind of getting argumentative with people at the renewal time frame of like, well, this is a hard market. This is what's up. This is the deal. Well, it doesn't matter when you're reacting to bad news, like you got a flat tire, whatever, you got your income tax bill in the mail and you're like, what? You get your oil heat bill in the mail and you're not expecting it. You're still not happy about it. And I think we all have to be on our A game. So what are you guys seeing as far as renewal?
I think renewals are going to continue to be challenging, but I think those agencies that are being proactive, that are building trust, that are having these educational conversations with their client, those conversations become easier at the next renewal because now we've established trust. We understand what's going on. We educated the client and we've built our toolkit and now we've had these conversations, and the more that we have these conversations, the easier they become. Does that make it easier for the client to digest? No. Does it make the conversation any less difficult? No. But we become more skilled and we put those tools in our toolbox every time we can just be proactive, have those conversations, and really be confident in our roles as the licensed insurance professional, as this client's guide to success. And so I think as long as, to Kelly's point, we are honest, we're transparent, and we come from a caring and kind place, almost all we can do.
I think I also think that now is the time as the opportunity in the hard market is to not cater to the bottom of your book and almost take the stance it's okay if they leave. Like, I use the example a lot, as many of you on here do. And so when a flight gets canceled, I'll be the first person generally that's going to get rebooked or pretty close to that top. My mom, who flies like once every 4 years, might be in Toledo till Tuesday. I will be, even if I'm ping ponging a couple different places to get to where I need
Your
to go.
text messages will be blowing up.
Yeah, your text messages will be blowing up for sure. I think that we also have to identify like we're not going to save. Every agency wants to be a value driven agency. Well, that bottom 10, 15, 20% of your book is not value driven. So it's very important. Like we would prioritize a new client or an existing client over a new client, like in the service mindset and the renewal mindset, we have to be looking at premium. We have to be looking at the quality of the client. We have to be looking at where we're going to spend our time because we won't have time to spend with everybody. And if we do what a typical agency does, which is the squeaky wheel gets the grease, the lowest level clients will eat up all of our bandwidth and our attention and our favors with underwriters. And in some states, there's even rationing of policies, like you can only write X per month. You
Yeah.
can't give that away, And so I really, really encourage agencies to get onto the bandwagon of client tiering and identifying. And it's not easy in a lot of management systems. It's not like front and center, like this is a tier one client. I know what to do. But I think it's really time to have those conversations, tier one, tier two, tier three, whatever you call them, and really identify, no, tier one is where we focus on, tier two is here, tier three is here, because it's impossible today to get that going.
Well, and to Stephen's point earlier, we have to have agency standards. And those agency standards helps guide the agents through the system, because you'll hear an agent say, well, I don't write state minimum limits, but then somebody in the same agency says they do. So you want those standards. So, somebody can say, well, I'm sorry, we don't write those limits. You have to get this limit, or you'll have to go look for another insurance agency. So I think standards and knowing, the tiers and standards kind of leads to the tiers as well. I think it's helpful in having those guidelines as a staff member. It helps them understand exactly what the agency is looking for and what our target markets are.
I think once we set those standards and give it to the team too, a lot of times it's refreshing to them. They're like, again, at least I now know, right? And if we're seeing something less than the standard, then we're having the conversation like, why did this happen?
I was going to say, it's the whole conversation of what is a good job.
Right.
And I'm just going to encourage everybody who has standards, producers, owners cannot come back the next day and say, did you reshop them? Well, no, they were a tier two account that didn't meet the qualifications. Like that should be the first thing everybody looks at, because people get PTSD on that and they're like, oh, well, they were mad. I didn't shop them. I should have, it gets all into the weird feelings mode of things.
Yeah.
But I also think at renewal, we have to be proactive. You can't be reactive. If you were just started getting more proactive last year, you know what? People are not going to take that year two. Okay, I took my second rate increase. And, the economy is a wild card too of the people that get layoffs or things keep getting more expensive. We are seeing more and more midterm, cancellations. And I say that because I think some of the direct writers are encouraging people to take the policy effective that day. So say I have a renewal March 1st and I call in on February 15th, they're making that policy effective February 15th, not March 1st. And so when they're calling an agency to cancel, they're saying, okay, so when do you need to make cancellation effective? You're, March 1st. No, I have coverage today.
I already got coverage. I did it 3 days ago. I forgot to call you.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if every client understands truly what that means either, 100%, to be honest with you. But I've heard a lot of the recorded phone calls, especially with direct writers, that people are calling in and canceling, somewhat midterm, not a true midterm, but close to it, ahead of schedule, because that's what they're being instructed to do by some of the direct writers. So you also have to be careful to get out and be as proactive as possible. And that goes into putting the customer at the center of everything that we do. It's like, well, how would you want to be treated? Would you want to go ahead and your doctor calls you like 4 weeks later after getting medical results, or would you want to do it sooner than that?
And also
final thoughts on
take a lot of personally, right? It's so personal when my client calls and they're so upset. And so I think they also have to remember that they didn't set the rates, and, they're there to help the client, and they cannot take these things so personally. We have to help them understand that, we are providing value, and we're helping our client through this situation, but this is a business and they didn't set the rate. And so they have to just help guide the client and educate them through the process.
So final thoughts, we are in the old market.
It was hard when it first came out, but guess what? It's just the market now, and that's what we have to remember. I was actually talking to somebody the other day, and they were like, oh, this is the second hard market in my career. I'm like, I've done this over 20 years. When was the first one? She's like, in the early 2000s. I'm like, well, that's when I started in insurance. And she goes, well, because you were starting in insurance, you didn't realize it was a hard market because it was just the market. But it was hard. And this was the second one. And I'm like, it was kind of eye-opening to me, because now I'm like, shut up. All new folks starting, it's just the market. You know no different. So you're learning to adapt quicker and you have a better attitude about it because it is what it is. It's some of us aged or seasoned agents that I think are taking it a lot harder because the good days are gone. But even then, I can think of what happened when all the contractors went out of business in 2008, what happened with the hair salons, what happened with the, housing crisis. All these things have happened over our careers and we have to keep evolving. And this is just the next step in the evolution. I think that that's what we have to remember is it's not hard. It's just the new norm.
Well, and I think we need to recognize that the reason why the carriers are making the changes they're making is because it's necessary, because they're finding that some of the stuff they covered shouldn't have been covered in the first place. So now they're requiring documentation. Like when we go to the DMV to get a driver's license, we don't go empty-handed. We have to take all this documentation. Well, the same thing is happening in insurance agencies. And when customers are like, well, why do I have to have all this documentation? And the reasoning for it is because the market has changed and the carrier is making sure that they're placing good risks to try to avoid having more losses that makes your rates go up even more. So they're being proactive in making these decisions to try to slow things down and get you with them. So, and making sure that they're covering good risks. So we've got to also explain to the client why the carriers are doing what they're doing and show them that it's necessary and it's a positive thing to help protect them from further or more increases.
And I would say, I've been in insurance long enough to know it will change. There is light at the end of that tunnel. Now, Mother Nature has to be, on our side as well. And we don't know when it is, but we also have to remember this is what we're here for. This is our time to shine as insurance professionals and to really help our clients see our value and guide them through these processes. And that's exactly what we're here to do. A doctor doesn't show up and go, oh, waiting room full of patients, right? Our clients call, we should be happy to receive them and receive those opportunities and know that we have a lot of potential there still to grow our agency.
Yeah, and I'll just leave with this. I mean, diamonds are made under pressure. The best agents will be made in this market. There is opportunity out there. I think the clients will finally value having a good agent versus just having an agent that shops the price for them as often as possible. And it's your decision on how you're going to approach this. Is the marketing happening to you or for you? Right.
Yeah.
And if you want the market happening to you, you're being selfish because it's happening to the client or the vehicle that talks to them about it. And I'm just going to leave with this because Bobby talked a little bit about people taking personally. I think we also have to identify that I've always had the saying, if you can't afford the policy, you can't afford the claim. Well, here's the new statement. If you can't afford the policy, you probably can't afford what it is insuring. Because, if you can't afford your homeowner's insurance, you can't afford to proactively put on a new roof. Right? So, there is home maintenance that has to happen. There is vehicle maintenance that has to happen. There's, proactivity in businesses of running good businesses and paying attention to the details and not having safe workplaces and good quality products. So if you're sitting there saying, oh my God, I can't afford my homeowner's policy, well, could you afford, to go ahead and if your roof was 20 years old, could you afford to put the new roof on? And so many things have changed. And that was something that was eye-opening that I learned was before my grandparents had one house and their goal was to pay off their mortgage. And they would do whatever they had in that house and they would get the water heater and they would get the new windows and all this. This is all part of their budgeting process. And today people stay in a house for 6 or 7 years and they don't always do the same maintenance or upkeep, or they don't have the budget, the resources necessary to say, okay, you're 18, we better start saving up for that roof that we know we're going to need at that time. Now today it's there's water in my house. The insurance company is going to get me a new roof, right? And so psychologically things have changed, right? Of how people viewed some of these things, right? Tires, brakes, all that stuff. It's if you can't afford your policy, truly can't afford it, can you afford the new brakes that you're going to need? And so sometimes I think it's got to be a little bit of a reckoning of, what we have. So, well, thank you guys for being on this blog banter. We have a whole series on the hard market. We do hard market training. So if your team needs help how to communicate with the clients, what to say, approach and have confidence how to manage their time. We are your people. We have whole programs that we can work directly with your team, or you can get them in our store, school, and start doing it yourself right now, today. So don't delay. All right, guys, we will see you on the next podcast.